The Muslim ruler Boabdil left in tears. It was said that his mother spat out at him, "Do not weep like a woman for that which you cannot defend like a man." Isabella's victory in Granada put an end to an incredible society. In the 700 years that they'd been in Europe, the Muslims of Al-Andalus had built a culture which was the very pinnacle of civilized life, influencing Europe in ways that we're only just beginning to understand. And Isabella would endeavour to ensure that Islam in the West would never enjoy such a relationship again. A few years after Ferdinand and Isabella came to power, they set up an organisation that affected the most extreme form of religious control that Europe has ever known. The Inquisition. The purpose of the Inquisition was to track down and eliminate anyone who wasn't an Orthodox member of the Catholic Church. Those found guilty of heresy were subjected to a sinister public ceremony called an auto de fe. In this eerie ritual, vestiges of which are still performed today, the guilty were forced to repent their sins while their accusers watched on, hidden under hooded caps. The sinners were then detained. Some were burnt at the stake. Most had their homes and livelihoods taken from them. In 1526, the Spanish Inquisition came to Granada to deal with the Muslim problem. Muslims were labelled heretics and given a stark choice: convert to Catholicism, leave the country, or be punished. The Muslims of Granada were segregated from the rest of the population. Their ghetto survives as the old quarter of the city today. It's a fantastic house. Thank you. Many of the houses that the Muslims were forced out of are still standing. Antonio Orihuela lives in one. It's almost inverted, because you don't have any windows looking out onto the street, but the focus is in the middle, here on the courtyard.
Yes, the courtyard is the center of the family life. So all the doors and windows are open to the courtyard and closed to the street. Privacy was one of the most important characteristics of these houses. Outside the house, they were Christian. They went to the church with the priest. They celebrate the wedding in the Christian way, but then later they came home to celebrate again the wedding in the Muslim style.
What happened though when the Inquisition came knocking on the door?
Well, as you see, these houses have the vent entry. So from outside, even if the door is open, it's not possible to see what happens in the courtyard.
The Inquisitors went from door to door, seeking out those they still suspected of being Muslim. A number of civic leaders had already been expelled, and so often it was only women and children left. They herded them up and held them in churches by night so that they could be tried the following morning. Some of the women cried out that they were like lambs being taken to the slaughter and wished that instead they'd been allowed to die in their own home. The Inquisition was so brutally efficient that within 20 years, all Muslims in Spain had been forcibly converted to Catholicism. But this wasn't enough. Many still continued to practice their faith in private. And so, in 1609, the Spanish crown ordered the removal of all Muslims from Spain.
Perhaps the most shocking thing in the expulsion is they were not actually expelling Arabs, nor were they expelling Berbers. The huge majority of the people that were being expelled by blood, by DNA, if you will, were as Iberian as their Christian cousins in the north who were kicking them out of the peninsula. It's really it's an enormously different vision of what the expulsions were and what they meant when we realize that the people who were being thrust out were as native to the peninsula as the Christian kings.
Why do you think the Catholic authorities felt they had to expel the Moors in 1609?
The Spanish Empire, for it was indeed by then the empire, simply felt pressed in so many different directions. They were very much afraid of the Turks, who were in fact raiding from North Africa and raiding along the southern coast of Spain. They were fighting wars still in the Americas. It was one internal problem that they simply could not deal with any longer.
In 10 years, over 250,000 Muslims were expelled from Spain. Forbidden to take any possessions with them, most sought refuge in North Africa. When Isabella and Ferdinand died, this is where they were buried. It's a little corner of the Alhambra, and it's decorated with inscriptions from the Quran. They read, "There is no true God but Allah." In many ways, it's a curious choice for a Christian entombment, but it does speak of that complicated relationship that was enjoyed by the Catholics and the Muslims. On one level, it says that Isabella and Ferdinand were still half in love with all things Islamic, but on the other, it's a bold and uncompromising statement of control. And in Cordoba, the new Catholic rulers did something unbelievable. In a daring act of what can only be described as inspired vandalism, architects gouged out the centre of the mosque. In its place, built one of the most spectacular cathedrals in Spain. The result is a shocking and blasphemous conflation of two of the world's most powerful religions. It is unnervingly beautiful, but possesses an underlying schizophrenia, as if a terrible and silent battle is being carried out in the very architecture of the building. Spain's troubled relationship with its Muslim past continued into the 20th century. The dictator Franco invented his own version of his country's heritage.
Franco, this period was somehow interrupting what was for him a continuum history. He wanted somehow to, if not delete it, he wanted to forget about it. So what he did was to explain the whole Muslim or the whole Al-Andalus as a kind of continuum from the Visigothic period to the Catholic kings, by saying that the Muslims in Al-Andalus were not such big, good Muslims, but much more Christianized. So this is the political use of history. He wanted to explain the identity of being Spaniards.
And for Franco, that identity was a continuation from the Visigothic period right through to the Catholic period.
Yeah, exactly.
Serafin Fanjul is an academic whose books on the history of Al-Andalus are bestsellers in Spain. Do you think that Spanish people today are proud at all of the Arabic episode in their history, or are they ashamed of it?
No, not at all. Strictly speaking, it's not our past. It's the past of other people. As a modern-day Spaniard, I would feel very little connection with the Arab past. Spanish people don't live like them. We don't dress like them. We don't feel like them. I don't know how you can say we are